After retiring, I bought a mountain cottage to enjoy nature in the peace and quiet of the mountains. But 2 days later, my son called me. I need your cottage as collateral. Sign the papers, or your grandson will lose the roof over his head. I didn't argue, playing the role of the obedient father. But when he arrived with the real estate agent, they found the surprise I had prepared, a revenge that would change their lives forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The phone rang at 6:30 in the morning. Too early. Way too early for good news. I fumbled for it on the nightstand, still groggy from unpacking boxes until midnight. Through the window, dawn was just breaking over the Rockies, painting the peaks in shades of pink and gold that had drawn me here in the first place. My mountain cabin, my dream, finally real after 40 years of waiting. "Dad?" Travis's voice cracked through the speaker. "Dad, I need your help, right now." I sat up, instantly awake. My son never called this early, never sounded like this, desperate, breathless, like he'd been running. "What's wrong? Is Lucas okay?" My grandson, 10 years old. The thought of anything happening to that kid made my chest tight. "Lucas is fine. It's the house, Dad. The bank is foreclosing. We're going to lose everything." His words tumbled out in a rush. "Joyce and we got behind on payments. I tried to fix it. I really did. But they won't listen. They gave us 10 days. I stood up, pacing to the window. The view that had cost me $475,000, every penny I'd saved, stretched before me. Mountains, pine trees, peace. 10 days? I repeated. "Travis, how did it get this bad?" "That doesn't matter now." His voice rose. "Dad, I need your cabin. As collateral. Just temporarily, I swear. Sign the papers and we can negotiate with the bank. Otherwise, Lucas loses his home. Your grandson will be on the street." The world tilted slightly. My cabin. The place I'd closed on just 2 weeks ago, moved into 3 days ago, where I'd spent the last 48 hours finally breathing free. "Travis, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why? There wasn't time. Look, I'm coming up there on the 17th with a realtor who can handle the paperwork. Darren knows how to do this fast. Just trust me, okay? This is for Lucas." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, watching the sun climb higher. "Trust me." Those words echoed in the silence of my brand new living room, where boxes still lined the walls, where I'd carefully unpacked my collection of architectural sketches from 40 years restoring historic buildings across Colorado. 40 years of the Brown Palace Hotel restoration, the Molly Brown House renovation, state capitol preservation work. Every weekend I'd drive up to these mountains, look at properties, dream about the day I could finally afford my own piece of this wilderness. And now, after 2 days of actual peace, my son needed it as collateral. I thought about Travis as a kid, bright-eyed, curious, the way he'd sit on job sites with me, asking questions about load-bearing walls and foundation work, how he'd wanted to be an architect too until he'd changed his mind in college. College I'd paid for. $120,000. Then the wedding to Joyce, $35,000. The down payment on their house in Denver, $25,000 I'd loaned and never seen repaid. Lucas. I thought about Lucas, my grandson who'd just started 5th grade at Slavens Elementary, who loved comic books and wanted to be a marine biologist, even though he lived in landlocked Colorado, who shouldn't have to worry about being homeless. My phone buzzed. A text from Travis. "I know it's a lot to ask, but you're the only one who can help us. Please, Dad." I looked around my cabin, the one at 847 Wilderness Road, Breckenridge, Colorado, 80424, Summit County, where conservation easements were common and property rights were taken seriously, where I'd specifically chosen this location because of its legal protections. Something nagged at me. Something about the timing, about the desperation in Travis's voice, about Joyce, who I'd maybe heard speak to me directly 3 times at family gatherings, always looking at her phone, always somewhere else to be. But Lucas, that kid deserved better than whatever mess his parents had created. I made coffee. Strong. Dark roast from Daylight Donuts on Main Street, where I'd stopped yesterday to grab breakfast. The owner, an older woman named Ruth, had welcomed me like I'd lived here for years. "You're in the old Henderson place," she'd said. "Beautiful spot. You'll love it here." I'd met my neighbor too, Bob Davidson, retired lawyer, late 60s, with a friendly handshake and an offer to show me the best hiking trails. We'd talked for an hour on his porch, and he'd mentioned how property law in Colorado protected homeowners, especially retirees. How there were ways to safeguard your assets if you knew what you were doing. The coffee burned my tongue. I barely noticed. 10 days, Travis had said. He'd arrive on the 17th. That gave me just over a week to figure out what was really happening. Because in 40 years of architectural work, of dealing with contractors, lawyers, city officials, permit applications, and building codes, I'd learned one crucial lesson. When someone pushes you to sign papers quickly, you slow down and read the fine print. I thought about calling Travis back, asking more questions, demanding details about the mortgage, the bank, the foreclosure timeline. But something stopped me. Instead, I sent a simple text. "We'll talk when you get here. I'll help however I can." Because I would help. I always had. That was what fathers did. But I'd also spent 40 years learning how to protect structures from collapse, how to preserve what was valuable, how to recognize when a foundation was rotten before it brought the whole building down. The sun rose higher. The mountains watched, ancient and patient. And I stood in my cabin holding my coffee, feeling the weight of a choice I hadn't even fully understood yet. Help my son, protect my grandson, risk everything I'd worked for, or do what I'd done for 4 decades in my profession, take my time, examine the structure carefully, and make sure I understood exactly what I was dealing with before I committed to anything. Travis said he'd arrive on the 17th with Darren the Realtor. That gave me time to think, time to plan, time to make absolutely certain that whatever I signed, whatever I agreed to, it would be on my terms. Because loving your family didn't mean being stupid, and being a good father didn't mean being a doormat. I'd learned that lesson too late with Travis. Maybe it was time to teach him one in return. The mountains didn't answer, they never did. But they'd seen plenty of people come up here looking for peace, only to discover that sometimes peace had to be fought for. I took another sip of coffee and started making phone calls. The next 3 days crawled by like injured animals. I couldn't settle, couldn't unpack the rest of my boxes, couldn't enjoy the view that had cost me everything. Instead, I spent hours on the phone with Travis, trying to piece together what had happened. Each conversation left me more confused than the last. "It's complicated, Dad," he kept saying. "The mortgage got behind. Some unexpected expenses. You know how it is." But I didn't know. That was the problem. Travis worked as a sales manager at Premier Auto Group on South Broadway in Denver. Decent money. Joyce had her marketing job at some agency downtown. They lived in a nice neighborhood off 6th Avenue. Nothing extravagant. Where had the money gone? "How much are we talking about?" I asked during our second call. A pause, long enough to make my stomach drop. "The arrears? About $43,000. $43,000. Behind on a mortgage. How did someone get that far behind without asking for help sooner?" "Travis, that's—" I stopped myself. Getting angry wouldn't help Lucas. "Okay, walk me through the collateral process. What exactly does Darren need from me?" "He'll explain everything when we get there. Just basic paperwork, quick and clean." His voice brightened artificially. "You won't lose anything, Dad. I promise. It's just to show the bank we have assets. Once we catch up on payments, we release the collateral. Simple." Nothing about this felt simple. That evening, Joyce called. First time she'd phoned me directly in maybe 2 years. "Clifton, I want to thank you." Her voice dripped with something I couldn't quite name. Honey? Or poison disguised as honey? "What you're doing for us, for Lucas, it means everything. Travis is just too proud to say how much this matters. Joyce, I'm doing this for my grandson. You understand that, right?" "Of course. Family first. That's what's important." A pause. "You know, we've been under so much stress. Travis has been working so hard, trying to provide. Sometimes things just spiral, you know?" I didn't know. In 40 years, I'd never been behind on a mortgage payment, never missed a utility bill, never let my problems become someone else's crisis. But I didn't say that. Instead, I asked, "How's Lucas handling this?" "Oh, he doesn't know anything. Kids shouldn't worry about adult problems." She laughed, light and breezy. Actually, he's been asking about you. Wants to know when he can visit your cabin. Maybe this summer. Any time, I said. He's always welcome. You're so generous, Clifton. Travis is lucky to have a father like you. The call ended. I sat on my deck, watching the sun set behind the peaks, and that word echoed in my head. Generous. Was that what I was? Or was I just easy to manipulate? I thought about the $120,000 for Travis's education at Colorado State University, how he'd switched majors 3 times, turned a 4-year degree into 5.5. I'd paid every semester without complaint. The $35,000 for his wedding at the Ritz-Carlton in Denver. Joyce had wanted everything perfect. Ice sculptures, premium bar, destination bachelor party in Vegas. I'd written the check and told myself it was an investment in their happiness. The $25,000 loan for their house down payment 7 years ago. Travis said he'd pay me back within 2 years. I was still waiting. At this point, I'd stopped asking. Family didn't keep score, right? Wrong. Apparently, family did keep score. They just counted differently than I did. By the 3rd day, I'd pulled together every document related to my cabin. Purchase agreement, title insurance, property survey, assessment from Summit County showing the cabin's value at $498,000, more than I'd paid thanks to the recent market surge and the work I'd already done on the interior. The place had good bones, original timber framing from 1997, but I'd noticed immediately how the previous owners had maintained it. New roof 2 years ago, updated electrical, the kind of property that would appreciate steadily in a market where mountain real estate was liquid gold. Losing this would destroy me financially. At 65, I couldn't start over. This was my retirement, my nest egg, my future. But Lucas, 10 years old, my grandson, the kid who still hugged me without embarrassment, who asked questions about my restoration projects like they were the most fascinating things in the world, who wanted to save dolphins even though he'd never seen an ocean. What kind of grandfather would I be if I let him lose his home? My neighbor Bob stopped by on the 4th day, brought over some elk jerky he'd made himself. You settling in okay? He asked, eyeing the still-packed boxes in my living room. Been distracted, I admitted. Family stuff. His expression shifted. Lawyer instincts, maybe. Everything all right? I found myself explaining. Not everything. I wasn't ready to voice my doubts out loud. But enough. Travis's situation. The collateral. The 10-day deadline. Bob listened carefully, chewing jerky. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You know about life estates? He finally asked. Vaguely. Property law isn't my specialty. Might want to look into them. And conservation easements. Colorado has specific protections for retirees who are vulnerable to financial exploitation, especially from family members. He held my gaze. Not saying that's what's happening here. Just saying it pays to be informed. After he left, I sat with his words. Financial exploitation. From family. The phrase felt like acid. No. Travis wouldn't. He was desperate, not malicious. There was a difference. But Joyce's voice on the phone replayed in my head. That sweetness. That gratitude. Everything about it felt rehearsed. I pulled up my laptop and started researching. Life estates, homestead exemptions, property protections under Colorado law. The more I read, the more I understood what Bob had been suggesting. Ways to protect myself, legal shields, safety nets. But using them meant I didn't trust my own son. Meant I believed he might actually try to take everything from me. The cabin creaked around me as temperature dropped with nightfall. Through the window, stars emerged over the mountains, sharp and cold and infinite. I thought about Lucas's laugh. Travis as a kid, before Joyce, before the wedding, before the money became more important than the relationship. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every check I'd written, every time I'd put their needs ahead of my own. And I made my decision. I'd sign the papers. I'd trust my son. I'd help my grandson. But I'd also spend the next few days learning everything I could about property law in Summit County, Colorado. Just in case. Not because I didn't trust Travis, because I'd spent 40 years in architecture learning one fundamental truth. Hope for the best, but always reinforce the foundation, just in case. 2 days later, I needed groceries. The cabin's pantry was still mostly empty, and I'd been living on coffee and Bob's elk jerky. Time to stock up properly. I drove down the mountain into Breckenridge, windows open, pine-scented air rushing through the truck. For the first time since Travis's call, I felt almost normal. Research had eased my mind. Colorado law protected homeowners in surprising ways. Life estates, homestead declarations. Even if worst came to worst, I had options. Trust, but verify. That was my new motto. City Market sat on the south end of Main Street, but I spotted Mountain Java on the way and decided caffeine came before groceries. The caf occupied a converted Victorian house, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood. My kind of place. The architect in me appreciated the restoration work someone had done. Original crown molding, refinished hardwood floors, modern fixtures that didn't clash with the historic elements. Inside, maybe a dozen people scattered at tables. I ordered a large dark roast from a barista with purple hair and multiple piercings. While waiting, I scanned for a seat. Most tables were taken, but a corner booth sat empty, partially hidden by a decorative partition. Old barnwood, nicely weathered. Perfect. I settled in with my coffee and phone, checking email. Behind me, on the other side of the partition, 2 women talked, loud enough to hear clearly. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. The partition just didn't do much for sound. Then I heard my name. "Clifton bought this cabin with literally all his money," one voice said, Joyce's voice. That same honey-sweet tone from our phone call. "Travis says it's worth like 500 grand, maybe more. Once the old man signs the papers, we give it a month, then sell. Pay off Travis's mess and still have plenty left over." My hand froze halfway to my cup. "Wait, I thought this was about foreclosure." Another woman, younger, uncertain. "You said the bank was taking your house." Joyce laughed, actually laughed. "Please, that's the story we told Clifton. Needed something dramatic, you know, make him feel guilty. The grandson angle really sealed it." A pause. "We're not losing the house. We're just drowning in Travis's poker debts. $85,000 because my husband can't stay off online casinos. His salary barely covers minimums anymore." "Joyce, that's..." The friend sounded uncomfortable. "That's really manipulative?" "It's survival, Rachel. Clifton's been sitting on retirement money for years while we're struggling. He owes Travis anyway after making him grow up with barely anything. This cabin? It should have been ours from the start." Something cold crystallized in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just absolute clarity. "What about the collateral story? Won't he figure it out?" "There is no collateral. It's a straight sale. We already have a buyer lined up, some California tech guy who wants a mountain retreat. Travis's realtor friend Darren is handling everything. Soon as Clifton signs the deed over, we're done. Old man will be back in some Denver apartment before he realizes what happened." "That's... Joyce, I don't know about this. Don't be so dramatic." Ice cubes rattled in a glass. Iced latte, probably. Joyce always ordered those. Clifton had his whole life to make money. We're in our prime. We deserve this. I sat perfectly still. Years of site inspections had taught me patience. When you found structural damage, you didn't react immediately. You documented, you analyzed, you planned your response. Behind the partition, Joyce's conversation shifted to vacation plans, somewhere tropical, once the cabin money came through. I stood slowly, left cash on the table, and walked out. They never saw me. I'd parked around the corner anyway. Inside my truck, I gripped the steering wheel. $43,000 in mortgage arrears. That had been the number Travis gave me. But Joyce just said $85,000 in poker debts. The math didn't add up because none of it was real. My son, the kid I'd raised alone after his mother left, the boy I'd worked double shifts to put through college, had looked me in the eye and lied. Not a small lie. Not a desperate exaggeration. A calculated, premeditated scheme to steal everything I owned. And Joyce. That phone call thanking me, praising me, calling me generous. Pure theater. Every word scripted to make me feel noble about surrendering my future. I started the engine but didn't drive. Not yet. My mind worked through the timeline. Travis called 8 days ago. Said he'd arrive on the 17th. That gave them time to find their buyer, arrange the sale, make it look legitimate. Darren the realtor wasn't helping with collateral paperwork. He was facilitating theft. The cabin should have been ours from the start, Joyce's words echoed. Entitlement. Pure, crystallized entitlement. As if I hadn't already given Travis $180,000 over the years. as if 40 years of my labor belonged to them by default. I thought about Lucas, my grandson. They'd used him as bait, knowing I'd do anything to protect that kid, and Lucas probably had no idea. 10 years old, innocent, while his parents plotted to rob his grandfather blind. The anger arrived then, not hot and explosive, cold and precise. The kind of anger that builds foundations and restores structures, the kind that plans. I drove back to the cabin slowly, carefully, obeying every speed limit, thinking. Travis underestimated me. They both did. Thought I was some naive retiree, too trusting and too old to fight back. They'd forgotten, or never known, who I really was. 4 decades in architectural restoration meant I knew every contractor, every lawyer, every building inspector in Colorado's Front Range. I'd worked on historic properties worth tens of millions, had navigated Byzantine zoning laws, preservation societies, and landmark commissions. I knew how to build things, which meant I knew how to protect them. Bob's words from our conversation floated back. Life estates, conservation easements, Colorado's protections for vulnerable retirees. At the time, I'd researched them as insurance. Now they became weapons. Back home, I pulled out my phone, found the number I needed. Stephen Marks, attorney. We'd worked together on the Brown Palace Hotel restoration, navigating deed restrictions and historic preservation requirements. Sharp mind, sharper ethics. If anyone could help me protect my property while teaching my son a lesson, it was Stephen. He answered on the second ring. Clifton Woods. Haven't heard from you in months. How's retirement treating you? Complicated, I said. I need legal help. Family matter. How fast can you draw up a life estate deed? For your mountain property? Day or 2 if we move quickly? A pause. What's going on? I told him. Everything. The phone call, the fake foreclosure, the overheard conversation at Mountain Java. Stephen listened without interrupting. Lawyer skill, and when I finished, he was quiet for several seconds. They're trying to commit elder financial abuse, he finally said. Colorado takes that seriously. We could pursue criminal charges. No. My voice came out flat. No police, no prosecutors. I want something more elegant. Elegant? I want to protect my property in a way they can't undo or contest, and I want them to understand exactly what they tried to do. I looked out at the mountains, at the cabin I'd dreamed about for 40 years. They think I'm an easy mark. Time to educate them otherwise. Stephen made a sound that might have been approval. Life estate deed is good. I'd also recommend a conservation easement. Limits what can be done with the property. Makes it essentially unsellable for development. And a homestead declaration which protects against creditors. Another pause. When are they arriving? The 17th? 10 days from now? Let's meet tomorrow. Denver, my office. We'll make your cabin bulletproof. After we hung up, I sat on my deck watching the sun track across the sky. Somewhere in Denver, Travis and Joyce were congratulating themselves on their clever plan, counting money that didn't exist yet, planning their tropical vacation. They had no idea what was coming, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Stephen's office occupied the 8th floor of a glass tower on 17th Street in downtown Denver. Modern, sleek. The kind of place that charged $400 an hour and earned every penny. I'd driven down the mountain that morning, leaving before sunrise. The meeting was scheduled for 9, and I arrived 20 minutes early, nursing a Starbucks in the lobby while watching lawyers and paralegals stream through the revolving doors. Young professionals in expensive suits, carrying briefcases that probably cost more than my first car. Different world from the construction sites and restoration projects I'd spent my life on. But I knew this world too, had worked with enough attorneys over 40 years to understand their language, their strategies, their value. Stephen met me in the lobby himself. No assistant, no ceremony. Just a firm handshake and a knowing look. You look tired, he said as we rode the elevator up. Didn't sleep much. True enough. I'd spent most of the night researching Colorado property law, cross-referencing statutes, building a mental framework. By 3 in the morning, I'd understood exactly what I needed. Now I just needed Stephen to make it legal. His office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, cherry desk, leather chairs, diplomas from University of Colorado, and Georgetown Law. But what caught my attention was the model on his credenza, a miniature Brown Palace hotel, the restoration we'd worked on together. I keep it as a reminder, Stephen said, following my gaze. Best project I ever consulted on. You taught me more about historic preservation in 6 months than law school taught me about property rights in 3 years. He gestured to a chair. Now tell me everything. Leave nothing out. I laid out the situation methodically. Travis's initial call, Joyce's phone conversation thanking me, the overheard planning session at Mountain Java, the poker debts, the fake foreclosure, the buyer already lined up. Stephen took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions, lawyer questions, precise. When I finished, he leaned back. The good news is Colorado has strong elder protection laws. Financial exploitation of vulnerable adults is a felony. What they're attempting, fraudulent inducement, elder abuse, potentially even theft by deception, carries serious consequences. I told you, no criminal charges. Understood. But you need to hear the legal context. He tapped his pen against the pad. Your son and daughter-in-law are attempting something that, if successful, would constitute a crime. That tells me how to structure your defense. We don't just protect your property. We make it legally impossible for them to profit from their scheme. How? Stephen stood, walking to his window. 3-layered approach. First, a life estate deed. You transfer legal ownership to yourself as a life tenant. You retain the right to live there until death, and the property can't be sold without your explicit written consent. Second, a conservation easement. Colorado loves these. We restrict development rights on the property. No expansion, no demolition, no significant alterations. Makes it far less valuable to buyers and nearly impossible to flip quickly. And third, homestead declaration. Protects the property from creditors up to $250,000. Under Colorado revised statutes, Title 38, Article 41. If they somehow did manage to get control, they couldn't use it to pay Travis's gambling debts anyway. I processed this. So even if I signed over the property tomorrow, the life estate means you'd still live there. The conservation easement means they couldn't develop or sell it easily, and the homestead declaration means their creditors couldn't touch it. He returned to his desk. But here's the beautiful part. We backdate everything. Backdate? Legal backdating, properly notarized with accurate dates of signing. We file these documents as having been executed before Travis's phone call, say, a week before. That establishes your intent to protect the property was independent of their scheme. Removes any argument that you did this in response to their legitimate request for help. Clever, ruthlessly clever. Can we do that legally? Absolutely. As long as we're honest about when documents are signed versus when they're effective. We create the paperwork now, sign and notarize it now, but the effective date is earlier. Perfectly legal under Colorado recording statutes. He pulled out fresh paper. I'll need detailed information about the property. Legal description, tax assessor parcel number, existing encumbrances. I'd brought everything. Deed, title insurance, survey, tax documents. Spread them across his desk like architectural blueprints. For the next 2 hours, we worked. Stephen drafted language while I reviewed, suggested changes, caught details. The life estate deed was 12 pages. The conservation easement, longer, had to specify exactly what restrictions applied. Homestead declaration was simpler, just 3 pages of statutory language. Who holds the conservation easement? I asked. Don't we need a land trust? Colorado Headwaters Land Trust. I've worked with them before. They'll accept the easement as a donation. You get a tax deduction, they get another protected property in Summit County. Win-win. He glanced up. This also means any buyer would have to deal with the land trust. Good luck explaining to them why you're trying to sell property your elderly father just placed in conservation. By noon, we had drafts. Stephen scheduled a notary for the afternoon. His paralegal could handle it. Then we discussed the appraisal. You said the cabin's worth more than you paid? Stephen asked. I think so. Original timber frame construction, professionally maintained, prime location. Plus, I've already done some restoration work on the interior trim. Original craftsman details that are rare now. Get it appraised. Professional appraisal, not just a market analysis. If the property is worth significantly more than your purchase price, that strengthens our position. Shows this was a sophisticated investment, not just a desperate retiree's last asset. I called an appraiser I knew from the restoration world. Patricia Henderson specialized in historic and unique properties. She could visit the cabin in 3 days, have a report within a week. Perfect timing. I'd have ammunition before Travis arrived. The notary arrived at 2:30. Short woman, efficient. We signed everything. Stephen had prepared the documents with effective dates of a week prior, before Travis's call, but after my cabin purchase. Everything legal, everything documented, everything bulletproof. These go to the Summit County Clerk and Recorder's office tomorrow, Stephen said, handing me copies in a leather portfolio. 48 hours to process. By the time your son arrives, they'll be part of the public record. Irrevocable. I held the portfolio, felt its weight. This feels like overkill. It's appropriate kill. Stephen's expression hardened. Clifton, your son tried to manipulate you using your grandson as bait. His wife discussed your cognitive abilities like you were a child. They deserve to understand that underestimating someone's intelligence is a mistake with consequences. Outside, Denver sprawled beneath a cloudless sky. I drove back to Breckenridge slowly, portfolio on the passenger seat, stopped at Bob's house on the way to my cabin. He answered the door with reading glasses perched on his nose, holding a paperback. Got a minute? I asked. Over coffee on his deck, I explained what I'd learned, what I'd done. Bob listened with the focused attention of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. When I finished, he smiled, not happy but satisfied. Life estate, that's perfect. Your son's going to walk into a legal mousetrap. He sipped his coffee. You know what's going to happen when he realizes, right? He'll be angry. More than angry. He'll feel betrayed. Ironic, given what he was planning. But that won't matter to him. Bob met my eyes. Are you ready for that? Was I? I thought about Travis at 8 years old, helping me sand baseboards on a restoration project. At 15, sullen and distant. At 25, asking for money again. At 38, scheming to rob me. I'm ready, I said. Back at my cabin, I organized everything into a folder. Life estate deed, conservation easement, homestead declaration, copies ready for Travis and Joyce when they arrived. A welcome package, Stephen had jokingly called it. Proof that their clever plan had been dead on arrival. They'd arrive in 6 days. 6 days for me to finalize everything. Get the appraisal. Review my strategy. Prepare for their reaction. 6 days before Travis learned that his old man wasn't quite as stupid as they'd assumed. The days passed in a blur of preparation. Patricia Henderson arrived with her camera and measuring tape, spent 3 hours documenting every detail of the cabin. Original timber framing, hand-carved corbels, period-appropriate hardware I'd restored myself. Her report came back showing a market value of $520,000, $45,000 more than I'd paid. Stephen had been right. The appraisal added weight to everything. Travis texted twice. Casual check-ins. Still good for the 17th? And really appreciate this, Dad. Each message felt like sandpaper against my skin. I responded simply. See you then. The 17th arrived. I woke early, made coffee, arranged the folder on my dining table. Everything organized. Life estate deed with the Summit County recording stamp. Conservation easement with the Colorado Headwaters Land Trust signature. Homestead declaration, Patricia's appraisal. All of it legally filed, publicly recorded, absolutely binding. They arrived at 2 in the afternoon. 3 vehicles. Travis's Audi first, followed by Joyce's Lexus, then a silver BMW, the Realtor, presumably. I watched from my window as they parked, as Travis emerged wearing khakis and a polo shirt like he was headed to a country club. Joyce stepped out in designer sunglasses, checking her phone. The third person, tall, early 40s, expensive suit, carried a leather briefcase. Travis spotted me on the deck. Waved. Big smile. Dad, thanks for doing this. They climbed the steps. Travis hugged me. Felt wrong, like embracing a stranger wearing my son's face. Joyce kissed my cheek, perfume overwhelming. Such a beautiful place, Clifton. You have excellent taste. The Realtor extended his hand. Darren Kowalski, Summit Realty Group. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Woods. Travis has told me so much about you. I bet he had. Come inside, I said. Calm, pleasant, channeling 40 years of dealing with difficult contractors and demanding clients. Never show weakness. Never reveal your hand too early. They settled around my dining table. Darren immediately opened his briefcase, pulling out documents. "This should be straightforward," he began, all professional efficiency. "We're establishing a collateral agreement with the property as security. Basic deed of trust, temporary arrangement. Once Travis catches up on his mortgage payments, we file a release. Simple process. Happens all the time." Joyce leaned forward, earnest. "We really can't thank you enough. Lucas has been so worried, though we try to shield him. This gives us breathing room." Travis nodded vigorously. "The bank's been impossible to negotiate with. This buys us time." I let them talk, watched Darren spread papers across the table, noticed how he avoided my eyes while explaining clauses and contingencies, noticed Joyce's foot tapping under the table, nervous energy, anticipation, noticed Travis's forced casualness, the way he kept glancing at his watch. "So if you could just sign here," Darren said, pushing documents toward me, "and here, initial here. We'll get these filed, and you're helping save your son's family." I didn't reach for the pen. Instead, I picked up my folder. "Before we proceed, there's something you should see." The room's energy shifted, subtle, like air pressure dropping before a storm. I opened the folder, removed the first document. "This is a life estate deed, filed with Summit County on," I checked the date, "the 8th, before Travis called me." I slid it across the table. "It transfers ownership to me as a life tenant. Means I retain the right to live here until death. More importantly, the property cannot be sold without my explicit written consent." Darren picked it up. "Read." His expression changed from professional confidence to professional concern in about 5 seconds. "There's more." I pulled out the conservation easement. "This restricts development rights on the property. No expansion, no demolition, no significant structural changes. Filed with the Colorado Headwaters Land Trust. Permanent and irrevocable. Makes the property far less attractive to buyers looking to flip or develop." Joyce's foot stopped tapping. "And this," the Homestead Declaration, "protects the property from creditors up to $250,000 under Colorado Revised Statutes, Title 38, Article 41. Means even if someone did gain control of the property, it couldn't be used to satisfy debts." Travis had gone pale. Not dramatically, just a gradual draining of color that would have been funny if it wasn't my own son sitting there realizing his scheme had collapsed. "Finally," I placed Patricia's appraisal on top of everything. "Professional assessment showing this property is worth $520,000, significantly more than my purchase price. Backs up my decision to protect it legally." Silence. Thick enough to cut with the utility knife I'd used yesterday to open moving boxes. Darren cleared his throat. "Mr. Woods, this complicates the collateral arrangement significantly. With these restrictions—" "There is no collateral arrangement," I said, voice level, matter of fact. "Because there's no mortgage foreclosure. Is there, Travis?" My son's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound emerged. Joyce tried to recover. "I don't understand what you're implying." "Mountain Java," I said, cutting her off. 10 days ago, around 11:30 in the morning, you were talking to your friend Rachel, discussing how you planned to sell my cabin to pay Travis's $85,000 in poker debts." I turned to Travis. "Funny how that number is almost double the mortgage arrears you told me about." The color that had drained from Travis's face returned as bright red splotches on his cheeks. Joyce's carefully maintained composure cracked like thin ice. "You were spying on us?" she said, voice rising. "I was buying coffee. You were loud." I looked at Darren, who'd gone very still. "And you? How much commission were you expecting from this sale? 15,000? 20? Must be disappointing to realize the property you were planning to flip is legally untouchable." Darren gathered his papers with jerky movements. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was simply trying to help. You were facilitating elder financial abuse. That's a felony in Colorado." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "I'm not pressing charges, not against any of you, but I want to be very clear about what almost happened here." Travis found his voice. "Dad, listen." "No." The word came out harder than I'd intended. "You listen. For 40 years, I gave you everything. College, $120,000. Your wedding, $35,000. Down payment on your house, $25,000 you never repaid, and you thanked me by lying to my face, using my grandson as bait, and planning to steal the one thing I'd saved for my retirement. I stood. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. All of you. And you're going to think very carefully about whether your relationship with me is worth repairing. Joyce grabbed her purse. This is insane. Travis, tell him. But Travis wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. And for the first time in years, maybe decades, I saw something besides entitlement in his eyes. Fear. He'd finally understood. His old man wasn't the easy mark they'd thought. And whatever happened next was going to be entirely on his terms, not theirs. They left without another word. Darren practically ran to his BMW. Joyce stormed to her Lexus, heels clicking like gunshots on the wooden deck. Travis lingered for a moment, mouth working like he wanted to say something, but no words came. Eventually, he turned and walked away. The Audi's engine roared to life with more force than necessary. I watched their vehicles disappear down Wilderness Road, dust trailing behind them like accusations. Then I poured myself a bourbon, Maker's Mark, the good stuff I saved for special occasions, and sat on my deck. The mountains looked the same as they had that morning. Indifferent. Eternal. Exactly what I needed. Bob appeared an hour later, crossing through the trees between our properties. Saw the convoy leave, he said. Quick meeting. Very quick. I offered him the bourbon bottle. He accepted. How'd they take it? About as well as you'd expect. Shock, denial, then retreat. I swirled my glass. The Realtor looked like someone had stolen his commission, which I suppose I had. Bob chuckled. That life estate deed is a work of art. Simple, elegant, completely bulletproof. Your lawyer knows his stuff. 40 years working with attorneys teaches you who's competent and who's just expensive. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun tracked lower. Eventually Bob headed home, and I was alone with my thoughts and my bourbon and my legally protected cabin. The peace lasted exactly 3 days. Then the dominoes started falling. Bob stopped by again, this time with news. Saw something interesting at King Soopers this morning. Your daughter-in-law was in the parking lot of Premier Auto Group, having what looked like a very public argument with your son. Lots of hand gestures. She drove off fast enough to leave rubber on the pavement. I could picture it. Joyce's carefully cultivated image cracking in a grocery store parking lot, while Travis's co-workers watched through the dealership windows. Public scene? Spectacular. Half the lot could hear her yelling something about gambling and lies. Bob's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the hint of satisfaction. Small towns. Word travels. Word did travel. Over the next week, I learned through various channels. Bob's wife, who knew someone who knew Joyce's friend Rachel, who apparently felt guilty about the whole affair, that Joyce had reached her breaking point. The failed cabin scheme was bad enough. But then the creditors started calling. Collection agencies, lawyers representing online casino companies. Travis owed money to multiple gambling sites, some offshore. The calls came at all hours, to their home phone, to Joyce's cell, to Travis's work number. That last one was the breaking point for Premier Auto Group. Travis's boss, a man named Richard Connolly, apparently valued discretion. Sales managers weren't supposed to have debt collectors calling the showroom, asking for payment on $20,000 gambling debts. Bad for the dealership's reputation, bad for customer confidence. Travis got a warning, then another. Then he was placed on administrative review, which was corporate speak, for we're documenting reasons to fire you. Joyce filed for divorce on a Wednesday. I learned about it from Stephen, who'd kept his ear to the legal community. Your daughter-in-law retained Baker & Associates. They're not cheap. Filing cites irreconcilable differences, but I heard from a paralegal friend that the real issue is financial infidelity. Apparently, Travis hid the extent of his gambling from her until recently. Recently meaning when their scheme to steal my cabin failed? Precisely. Stephen sounded amused. She's also requesting sole custody of your grandson, citing Travis's gambling addiction as evidence of instability. Smart move. Protects the kid and makes Travis look even worse. Lucas. I'd been trying not to think about him. 10 years old, caught between parents who were imploding. That kid deserved better than what he was getting. Travis called me on a Friday evening. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Travis. Dad. His voice sounded hollow, defeated. Nothing like the confident tone from 2 weeks ago when he'd walked into my cabin expecting to walk out with my future. I know I don't have any right to ask, but you don't. I kept my voice even, factual. You have no right to ask me for anything. Joyce filed for divorce. Work is threatening to let me go. The creditors are calling every day. A pause. I need help. Please. Like you've always helped me. We can forget this whole misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? The word tasted bitter. You tried to rob me, Travis. You lied about your grandson being homeless. You brought a realtor to my house to facilitate theft. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime I chose not to prosecute. I was desperate. The debts were crushing me, and I just thought... You thought I was too old and too stupid to fight back. I stood, walking to my window. The mountains were turning purple in the fading light. You thought 40 years of architectural restoration meant I didn't understand property law. You underestimated me because it was convenient. Dad, please, I'm your son. And I'm your father, which means the best help I can give you right now is letting you solve your own problems. I softened my tone slightly. Not much, just enough to be human. Travis, you're 38 years old. You have a gambling addiction. You've accumulated $85,000 in debt. None of that is my responsibility to fix. Maybe it's time to grow up. He hung up. Or I did. Hard to remember which. The next week brought more fallout. Joyce, apparently feeling strategic, sent a letter to several family members explaining the situation. Her version cast Travis as the villain, gambling addict, liar, manipulator who'd tried to defraud his elderly father. She positioned herself as a victim who'd been misled and was now bravely protecting Lucas from his father's instability. Smart, actually. Ruthless, but smart. She was controlling the narrative before Travis could, making herself sympathetic while isolating him further. The letter reached me through my cousin in Boulder. She called, concerned. Clifton, is this true? Travis tried to take your cabin? It's complicated, I said, which was diplomatic speak for, yes, but I'd rather not discuss it. News spread through our family network like wildfire in dry timber. By late July, everyone knew. Travis was the pariah. Joyce was the sympathetic figure escaping an addict, and I was the elderly victim who'd been targeted by his own son. I hated that last part. Victim implied weakness. Implied I hadn't seen it coming, hadn't prepared, hadn't won. But family politics weren't worth fighting. Let them think what they wanted. The important thing was that Travis's world was collapsing exactly as it should. Natural consequences, logical outcomes, actions leading to results. I felt no guilt about it, just a strange, cold satisfaction. And in the quiet moments when doubt crept in, I thought about Lucas, about protecting him, about teaching Travis a lesson that might eventually save that kid from having a father who thought manipulation and theft were acceptable paths through life. Sometimes mercy looked like punishment. Sometimes love required letting people fall. The mountains agreed. They'd seen it all before. August arrived with thunderstorms that rolled through the mountains every afternoon. I was refinishing the deck, something to keep my hands busy while Travis's world continued its spectacular collapse. When Stephen called, "Your son filed a petition to contest the life estate deed," he said without preamble. "Claims you were mentally incompetent when you signed it. Alleges undue influence from me and your neighbor, Bob." I set down my sandpaper. He what? It's a Hail Mary. Desperate and stupid. He retained some cut-rate attorney from Aurora, guy named Phillips, who specializes in family disputes, and has a terrible track record. Stephen sounded almost cheerful. The petition is so poorly written, it practically argues against itself. Claims you lacked capacity to make legal decisions, but then cites your long career in architecture requiring complex decision-making. It's beautiful in its incompetence. What happens now? We respond, easily. I'll file our motion to dismiss with prejudice. Include your appraisal showing the property's value and your sophisticated understanding of real estate. Attach character references from colleagues who'll testify to your mental sharpness. The judge will laugh him out of court. A pause. Though this will cost Travis legal fees he can't afford. Phillips charges $250 an hour, minimum $5,000 retainer. Your son just threw away money he doesn't have on a case he can't win. After we hung up, I stood on my half-refinished deck and felt something twist in my chest. Not guilt, not quite, but something adjacent. Travis was drowning, thrashing, making everything worse. Part of me, the part that remembered teaching him to ride a bike, helping with homework, celebrating his high school graduation, wanted to throw him a rope. The other part remembered Mountain Java, Joyce's laughter. The old man will be back in some Denver apartment before he realizes what happened. I kept sanding. 2 weeks later, Bob brought more news over morning coffee. Premier Auto Group, let your son go, he said, reading something on his phone. My wife's bridge club friend's husband works there. Apparently Travis missed 3 days of work without calling in, then showed up and had a screaming match with his manager about persecution. Security escorted him out. Screaming match? I pictured it. Travis unraveling, losing control in the middle of a car dealership showroom while customers watched. How bad? Bad enough that management is considering a restraining order if he comes back, something about threatening to sue everyone involved in his termination. Bob looked up from his phone. He's spiraling, Clifton. Classic pattern. Loses control of one thing, tries to control everything else, makes it all worse. That evening, Travis called again. I debated not answering. Decided I needed to hear this. They fired me. His voice was ragged. After 12 years, they just threw me out like garbage. Because of you. Because of me? You humiliated me. Everyone knows what happened. Joyce told everyone your family is treating me like a criminal, and now I can't even keep my job. He was yelling. You ruined my life because you couldn't help your own son. I waited until he ran out of breath. Then quietly, Travis, I didn't ruin your life. You did. The moment you decided to lie to me, manipulate me, and try to steal my property, everything that's happened since is just consequences. I was desperate. You were entitled. There's a difference. I watched lightning flicker over the mountains. You thought you deserved my cabin, that your problems gave you the right to take what I'd worked for. And when I defended myself, you convinced yourself you were the victim. I'm your son, which is why this hurts so much. My voice cracked slightly. First time I'd let emotion through. Travis, I would have helped you with the gambling debts if you'd asked honestly. Set up a payment plan, gotten you into counseling, worked something out. But you didn't ask. You plotted. There's no coming back from that. Silence on the line. Then almost a whisper. What am I supposed to do? Figure it out, like an adult. I hung up. The legal challenge died quietly in late August. Judge Morrison reviewed the filings, held a 15-minute hearing where Travis's attorney stumbled through arguments, while Stephen calmly presented documentation and dismissed the case with prejudice. Travis was also ordered to pay court costs, $3,000 he didn't have. Stephen called it the most predictable outcome in legal history. I called it justice. But the collateral damage kept spreading. Joyce's divorce proceedings accelerated. She'd found text messages on Travis's phone. Apparently, he'd been communicating with online gambling sites through encrypted messaging apps, hiding the extent of his addiction even from her. Her attorney used this in custody arguments. Travis got supervised visitation with Lucas, 2 hours every other weekend, with a court-appointed monitor present. I learned this from Lucas himself. The kid called me one evening, voice small and confused. Grandpa? Mom says I can't stay with Dad alone anymore. She says he's not safe, but he's still my dad, right? My throat tightened. Lucas, buddy, your dad loves you very much. He's just going through some hard times right now. The court is being careful, that's all. Did you and Dad have a fight? How did you explain betrayal to a 10-year-old? We had a disagreement, adult stuff. But it doesn't change how much I love you, okay? You can come visit me anytime. How about next weekend? We can go hiking. See some elk. Really? His voice brightened. Mom says you have a really cool cabin now. The coolest. I'll pick you up Saturday. After we hung up, I sat with the weight of it. Lucas was the innocent casualty here. None of this was his fault, but he was paying the price anyway. Children always did when parents self-destructed. That weekend, Lucas came up to the cabin. Joyce drove him, stayed just long enough to verify I was who I said I was, as if she hadn't known me for 15 years, then left without a word. Lucas and I hiked the Burro Trail, saw 3 elk and a family of deer, ate sandwiches on a rock overlooking a valley that stretched to forever. Dad's really sad. Lucas said between bites of his turkey sandwich. "He cries sometimes. Mom won't talk to him except through lawyers." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. "Are you mad at him?" "Disappointed," I said carefully. "Your dad made some bad choices, but I still love him. That doesn't go away." Lucas seemed to accept this. We finished our hike, spent the evening playing card games on my deck, and he fell asleep watching the stars through my living room window. Joyce picked him up the next morning, still silent, still cold, but she hugged Lucas tight when he ran to her, and I saw something genuine in her face for the first time since this whole mess started. She loved her son. Maybe that was something worth remembering, but it didn't change what they'd tried to do. September approached. Travis had found part-time work at a budget rental car desk at Denver International Airport. Massive pay cut, humiliating for someone who'd been a sales manager. But it was work, and the creditors were satisfied with small payments for now. The divorce would be final in November. Travis would keep their house. Joyce didn't want it anymore, but he'd have to refinance the mortgage in his name only. Assuming any bank would lend to someone with his credit situation, his life was in pieces, self-inflicted pieces, and I was the one who'd refused to stop the collapse. Sometimes at night, I wondered if I'd been too harsh. Then I remembered Joyce's voice in that calf, the calculated cruelty, the entitlement, and I slept just fine. Mid-September brought snow to the high peaks. I was inside working on a woodworking project, building Lucas a toy chest from reclaimed barnwood, when I heard tires on gravel. Not Bob's truck, different engine. I looked out the window and saw Travis's Audi, dustier than I remembered. Dented passenger door. The car that used to be pristine now showed signs of neglect. He climbed out slowly. Thin. When had he gotten so thin? His polo shirt hung loose, and the confident swagger was gone, replaced by something hunched and defeated. I met him on the deck. Didn't invite him in. Not yet. "Dad!" His voice cracked on the word. "Can we talk? Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I nodded toward the chairs. We sat. Silence stretched between us like a chasm. "I lost everything," he finally said. "Joyce is taking the house in the divorce settlement. Her lawyer found some clause I didn't understand. The gambling debts are killing me even with the payment plans. I'm working at an airport rental desk, making $15 an hour." He looked at his hands. "I know I don't deserve your help. I know what I'd tried to do was unforgivable. But Dad, I'm drowning, and I don't know how to fix it." No manipulation this time. No calculated pleading, just raw desperation. The armor had finally cracked. I let the silence sit. Watched an eagle circle overhead, hunting. Finally, "Travis, do you know what I did for 40 years? He blinked at the question. "You were an architect. Restoration work." "That's the title. But do you know what I actually accomplished?" I stood, walked inside, retrieved a box from my office, sat back down and opened it. Inside, photographs, certificates, articles, my career in physical form. "This is the Brown Palace Hotel." I handed him a photo. Historic building, grand lobby, restored to 19th century glory. I led the restoration team in 2012. $15 million project. We won the National Register of Historic Places recognition for excellence in preservation. Another photo. The Molly Brown House. I personally rebuilt the third-floor balustrade using period-appropriate techniques. Took me 8 months to get it right. Travis studied the images like he'd never seen them before. Maybe he hadn't. I'd never forced him to look. State Capitol Dome Restoration 2016. The gold leaf work. I consulted on the metallurgy and application process. Met with the governor 3 times. I pulled out a framed certificate. Colorado Preservation Award 2018. Highest honor in the state for historic architecture. Awarded at a ceremony with 200 professionals, business leaders, judges, politicians. I handed him the certificate, watched his eyes scan the ornate calligraphy, the official seals, the signatures. "I don't understand," he said. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "I did, multiple times. You never asked follow-up questions." I pulled out more photos. That's the lieutenant governor cutting the ribbon at the Capitol project. That's me with the director of the Colorado Historical Society. That's me speaking at the Denver Architecture Conference in 2019. I leaned back. "Travis, I know every major contractor in the Front Range, every building inspector, Every zoning attorney. I've worked with judges who specialize in property law. When you walked into my cabin with that realtor, planning to steal my property, you weren't dealing with a confused retiree. You were dealing with someone who'd spent 4 decades navigating the most complex property transactions in Colorado. His face had gone pale. Again, I was getting used to that look. But you never... He struggled for words. You always seemed so... normal. Regular job, regular house. You drove a 10-year-old truck. Because money wasn't the point. I gathered the photos back into their box. I chose projects for their historical significance, not their profitability. I could have made 3 times what I did working for developers building luxury condos. But I wanted to preserve history, not destroy it for profit. I met his eyes. And I wanted you to respect me for who I was as a person, as a father, not for my achievements or connections. So I downplayed them, kept them quiet. I never knew. Genuine shock in his voice. All these years, I thought you were just a regular guy who fixed old buildings. I was a regular guy who fixed old buildings. Those buildings just happened to be incredibly important, and the work required expertise that very few people possess. I closed the box. When you called asking for the cabin as collateral, I knew immediately something was wrong. People in my profession don't make snap decisions about property. We research, we verify, we protect our assets with every legal tool available. Travis sat very still, processing, recalculating everything he thought he knew about his father. The conservation easement, he said slowly. The life estate deed. That wasn't just luck or good advice. You knew exactly what you were doing. From the moment I overheard Joyce at Mountain Java, I allowed myself a thin smile. You underestimated me because I let you. That was my mistake. I taught you that competence was something to hide instead of celebrate. Made myself smaller so you wouldn't feel intimidated. I'm so sorry, his voice broke. Not just for the cabin, for never seeing you, for treating you like an ATM, for bringing Joyce into your home to lie to your face. Tears now, running down his cheeks. 38 years old and crying like a child. I was so arrogant, so entitled. I thought I deserved everything you had because I was your son. I never earned any of it. I wanted to be cold, wanted to keep the walls up, but something in his collapse felt genuine. Real remorse, not strategic tears. What do you want from me, Travis? Nothing. He wiped his eyes. I don't deserve anything. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what I did, who you are, what I threw away. He stood. Thank you for showing me these. I should go. Sit down, command in my voice. He sat. I said I wouldn't give you money. I meant it. But I can give you something else. What? A path forward, on my terms. I leaned forward. First, you get help. Real help. Gamblers Anonymous, therapy, weekly, documented. Second, you start making things right. Small payments to your creditors. $500 a month to me for that $25,000 loan. Formal payment plan, legally binding. Third, you rebuild your relationship with Lucas, not because the court requires it, but because he deserves better than what you've shown him. Travis nodded, desperate agreement. And fourth, I held his gaze. You acknowledge what you tried to do. Publicly. To the family. Own it completely. No excuses, no justifications. Just the truth. I will. I'll do all of it. He meant it. I could hear it. Then we start over. New relationship, based on honesty and respect. Not on money or obligation. You willing to do that? Yes. No hesitation. We shook hands. Awkward. Tentative. But something real. Travis kept his word. First payment arrived a week later. Check for $500. Memo line reading, payment 1 of 50, loan repayment. I deposited it into a separate account Stephen had helped me set up, properly documented for tax purposes, legal, binding, real consequence with real accountability. He sent proof of his first Gamblers Anonymous meeting the same day. Photo of a sign-in sheet, his name clearly visible. Then another the next week, and the week after. I didn't ask him how it felt, didn't push for details, just acknowledged receipt. Small steps. The family meeting happened in late September. I organized it at my cousin Sandra's house in Boulder, neutral territory, big enough for the dozen relatives who showed up. Travis drove in from Denver looking like he might vomit. Joyce came separately with Lucas, her expression guarded, They hadn't seen each other in weeks, except during supervised visits. Sandra's living room fell silent when Travis stood. Everyone knew why we were there. Joyce's letter had made sure of that, but now they'd hear it from him. I tried to steal from my father. His voice shook but held steady. Not borrow, not use as collateral. Steal. I made up a story about losing our house to foreclosure, used Lucas as bait to make Dad feel guilty, and planned to sell his cabin to pay my gambling debts. $85,000 I'd lost playing online poker. Money I'd hidden from Joyce, from everyone. Lucas sat between Joyce and Sandra, eyes wide, too young to fully understand, old enough to sense the weight. Dad caught me. He'd prepared legal protections, life estate deed, conservation easement, because he's smarter than I ever gave him credit for. He's spent 40 years as one of Colorado's most respected architectural restoration experts, and I treated him like he was stupid. Travis's voice cracked. I betrayed his trust, used my own son as manipulation, and when it failed, I blamed everyone except myself. Silence, heavy, suffocating. I'm in therapy now, going to Gamblers Anonymous, making payment plans with creditors, working an hourly job because I lost my career through my own actions. He looked directly at me. And I'm trying to earn back even a fraction of my father's respect. Not because I deserve it, but because maybe, eventually, I can become the man Lucas deserves as a father. Lucas started crying. Quiet tears. Sandra put an arm around him. Travis looked like he wanted to go to his son, but knew he couldn't. Not yet. I stood, crossed to Lucas, crouched beside him. Hey, buddy. Your dad made mistakes. Big ones. But he's working to fix them. That's what matters now, understand? Lucas nodded against my shoulder. Can Dad still come to your cabin? With me? Someday, when he's ready, when we've rebuilt trust. I looked at Travis. These things take time. The meeting ended awkwardly. People filtered out with uncertain goodbyes, but several relatives, Sandra included, pulled me aside. You handled this right, Sandra said. Tough love. That's what he needed. Joyce left without speaking to Travis, but she didn't look angry, just thoughtful. October brought changes, small ones, incremental. Travis found work with Morrison Construction, a mid-sized firm doing commercial projects around Denver. Entry-level estimator position, $42,000 a year. Massive pay cut from his sales manager's salary, but honest work requiring math skills and attention to detail. His boss, a gruff man named Rick Morrison, had no idea about Travis's past. Just saw someone willing to work hard and learn. I'm reading blueprints, Travis told me during one of our weekly check-in calls. Learning material costs, calculating labor hours. It's humbling, but I like it. Feels real. The gambling attendance records kept coming. 12 weeks straight, then 16. Stephen helped us formalize the loan repayment into a proper contract. $25,000 at 5% annual interest, minimum $500 monthly payment, legally enforceable. Travis signed without complaint. Joyce still hadn't finalized the divorce. Her attorney had filed for continuance, legal term for pause, citing changing circumstances. Bob's wife heard through her network that Joyce was watching Travis closely, looking for signs the change was real or just temporary performance. Smart woman, calculating. But maybe that calculation could work in Travis's favor now. Lucas's visits increased. Joyce agreed to unsupervised weekends every other week. Travis would pick him up Saturday morning, spend time at whatever small apartment he'd rented near DIA, then drive him up to my cabin Sunday. The three of us would have lunch, play cards, talk about safe topics. Lucas slowly relaxed, around his father again. One Sunday in mid-October, after Lucas had gone inside to watch TV, Travis and I sat on the deck with coffee. Joyce called me yesterday, he said. Actually called, not through lawyers. Asked how work was going, whether I was still attending meetings. We talked for almost an hour. That's progress. She's not taking me back, not yet. Maybe not ever. But she said, he paused. She said Lucas needs his father in his life, and if I can prove I'm stable, really stable, she'll consider joint custody. Real custody, not just supervised visits. What did you say? That I'd prove it, however long it takes. He stared at his coffee. I miss her. Not the version of her that I thought I married. Some fantasy who'd bankroll my lifestyle. The actual her. The woman who's fierce and protective and refuses to accept anything less than what she deserves. She deserves better than what I was. Wisdom. Actual wisdom. From my son. Who knew? Keep doing the work, I said. The rest will follow, or it won't. But at least you'll be someone Lucas can respect. Because of you. He met my eyes. If you'd just given me money like always, I'd have gambled it away and learned nothing. You forced me to hit bottom, to really look at myself. I hated you for it. Now I'm grateful. We sat in comfortable silence, watching aspens turn gold on the mountainside. Bob waved from his deck. Travis waved back. Normal. Almost peaceful. The community gossip that had burned so hot in July and August had cooled to embers. People moved on to newer scandals. Travis's story became old news, and in its place, a quieter narrative emerged. Man hits rock bottom, gets help, rebuilds slowly. Not dramatic enough for sustained attention, which was exactly what Travis needed. Space to heal without cameras watching every stumble. By late October, I had records showing consistent therapy attendance, 19 consecutive gamblers, anonymous meetings, 3 months of debt payments, steady employment, improving relationship with Lucas. Proof of genuine change, not just promises. Stephen reviewed everything with professional approval. Your son is actually doing it, following through. That's rarer than you'd think in these situations. Think he'll make it? Better odds than most. Stephen closed the file. You gave him structure without rescuing him. Made consequences real, but offered a path forward. Textbook intervention, except most people can't maintain that boundary with family. I thought about Joyce's laugh in Mountain Java, about the fear in Travis's eyes when his scheme collapsed, about Lucas crying at the family meeting, about second chances earned through sweat and humiliation and genuine remorse. He's my son, I said simply. I love him enough to let him fail, and enough to help him stand back up when he's ready to do it himself. Outside my window, early snow dusted the peaks. Winter approaching, season of rest and preparation. And maybe, just maybe, the season when broken things could begin to heal. The invitation surprised me. Travis called in late September. Dad, Joyce and I were wondering, could we come up to the cabin, together, with Lucas? We want to talk to you, properly. Joyce agreed to this? It was her idea, actually. He sounded nervous, hopeful. She's been watching me follow through on everything. The meetings, the payments, the job. She said we both owe you something. More than an apology. An acknowledgement. I picked a Saturday. September the 28th. Gave them the afternoon. Made chili, my specialty. The one thing Travis had always liked about my cooking when he was growing up. Set the table for 4. They arrived together. Same car. That detail mattered. Joyce driving, Travis in the passenger seat, Lucas in back with a backpack full of books and games. They climbed out slowly, uncertain, like visitors approaching a shrine they weren't sure they had permission to enter. Lucas ran ahead, hugged me. Grandpa, Mom says we're having family dinner, like a real family. Just like that, buddy. I ruffled his hair. Go put your stuff inside. Adults need to talk first. He disappeared into the cabin. Travis and Joyce stood on my deck, and for the first time since this whole disaster began, I really looked at them. Travis, thinner but healthier somehow, clear-eyed. Joyce, less polished than before. No designer sunglasses, minimal makeup, real. Come in, I said. We sat at my dining table, the same table where I'd exposed their scheme 4 months ago. Joyce noticed. I saw a recognition flicker across her face. Travis pulled an envelope from his jacket. Payment number 5. He slid it across. $500, on time, every month. I'll keep doing it until the debt is paid in full, with interest. I took it, set it aside. That's not why you're here. No. Joyce spoke for the first time. Her voice had lost its honey coating. Just truth now, raw and difficult. Clifton, I need to say this. What I did, what we did, was unforgivable. I sat in a coffee shop and laughed about stealing from you. Called you the old man like you were a mark, not a person. Not Travis's father who'd sacrificed everything for him. Travis picked up the thread. I lied to your face. Used Lucas as manipulation. Brought a realtor into your home to help me commit theft. And when you defended yourself, brilliantly, completely, I blamed you. Called you selfish. Said you ruined my life. His voice shook. But you didn't ruin my life. You saved it. Forced me to see what I'd become. What we'd become. I enabled him, Joyce continued. Pushed him toward you like you were a resource to exploit. I resented you for being just an architect when you could have made more money. Never understood that you chose meaning over profit. Chose integrity over wealth. Everything I claimed to value but didn't actually respect. Silence, heavy with truth. Why now? I asked. What changed? I watched him. Joyce looked at Travis. For 3 months, I watched him go to those meetings, work that airport job without complaint, make payments he could barely afford, show up for Lucas even when the court said he didn't have to. And I realized he wasn't performing. He was actually changing, becoming the man I thought I'd married. She turned back to me, and I realized I needed to change too. Stop being the woman who measured people by their bank accounts. Start being someone Lucas could respect. Travis reached across the table, took her hand, small gesture, significant. We're not asking for forgiveness, he said. We don't deserve it. We're asking for a chance to prove we understand what we did, to show you, over time, that we've learned, that we're different people than we were in June. I looked at them. These two people who'd plotted against me, who'd calculated my worth and property values and commission percentages, who'd underestimated me so completely they'd walked into a legal trap that destroyed their lives, and I saw genuine remorse, earned through consequences, through public humiliation and financial ruin and loss of everything they'd taken for granted. You're right, I said. What you did was unforgivable by any normal standard. You tried to steal my retirement, my dream, the cabin I'd worked 40 years to afford. I let that sit. But here's what you don't know. I could have pressed charges. Elder financial abuse is a felony in Colorado. Stephen told me you were looking at 2 to 6 years in prison. I chose not to pursue that. Know why? They shook their heads. Because punishment without opportunity for growth is just cruelty. I wanted you to understand what you'd done, to face real consequences, to change or prove you couldn't. And Travis, I looked at my son. You changed. Actually changed. That's rare. Stephen told me 90% of people in your situation don't follow through. They promise everything, then return to old patterns within weeks. You didn't. You showed up, did the work, kept every commitment, because you gave me a structure, Travis said. Clear expectations, no rescues, just a path and a choice. I finally chose right. I stood, walked to my office, retrieved something I'd been saving, returned to the table and placed it between us. A framed photograph. Travis at 8 years old, covered in sawdust, helping me sand baseboards on a restoration project, both of us smiling. I've been carrying anger, I said, righteous anger, justified anger, but anger nonetheless, and I'm tired of it. So here's what happens now. I forgive you, both of you, not because you've earned it, though, Travis, you're working toward that, but because holding on to this is poisoning what time I have left with my grandson. Joyce started crying. Quiet tears. Real. But forgiveness comes with boundaries, I continued. New relationship. New rules. Travis pays back the loan. Non-negotiable. You both attend therapy, individual and eventually couples, if you reconcile. No borrowing money from me ever again. No asking about my finances. No assumptions about inheritance or future help. We start from zero. Earn trust through consistency. Build something honest or build nothing at all. Understood? Yes? They said it together. Lucas burst in from the living room. Is dinner ready? I'm starving. The tension broke. We laughed. Actual laughter. I served the chili. We ate on the deck, watching the sun track across the sky, turning aspens to liquid gold. Lucas chattered about school, about his marine biology dreams, about the elk he'd seen last visit, normal conversation, family dinner. After we ate, Travis helped me clear plates. Joyce took Lucas for a walk to see Bob's horses next door. Alone in the kitchen, my son turned to me. Thank you, he said, for not giving up on me, for caring enough to let me fall, for showing me who you really are. You're welcome. Now don't make me regret it. He smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. Through the window, I watched Joyce and Lucas walking hand in hand down the gravel road, watched Bob wave from his porch, watched the mountains stand eternal and patient. My cabin, legally protected, completely secure, absolutely mine, surrounded me with peace I'd earned twice over. Once through 40 years of work, once through 4 months of standing firm. Travis had lost his career, his marriage temporarily, his reputation, and $85,000 in gambling debts he'd spent years repaying. Joyce had lost her image of easy wealth and faced her own complicity. Both had been humbled completely, but they were here, together, trying, and I was here in my cabin at 847 Wilderness Road, Breckenridge, Colorado, master of my own future, teacher of hard lessons, father to a son who finally saw him clearly, justice served, lessons learned, life continuing. The mountains had witnessed it all. They always did, and they'd be here long after we were gone, watching other families struggle and heal, watching other people learn that respect isn't given, it's earned, protected, and sometimes fought for with everything you have. I joined my family outside. The 4 of us stood on my deck as sunset painted the peaks in shades of fire and gold. Not the family we'd been. Something harder won. Something real. And for the first time in 40 years, I felt completely at peace.